Okay, so get this. We're diving deep into gambling this time. And, sometimes it can get a little shady.
Yeah, for sure.
You sent us this really wild video about a Major League Baseball interpreter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he got caught up in this crazy gambling scandal. It's a real curveball, you could say.
Definitely.
So we're gonna, break down what happened in that story, but then also, like, what really is gambling? Is
Right.
it just like casinos and those lottery tickets, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, is it deeper?
Yeah, and we'll even like touch on why we're so drawn to risk and reward, the psychology of it all.
I'm fascinated by this scandal because it really, kind of shines a light on pro sports, where you have so much money and so much trust.
Exactly. It's like a real life drama playing out right in front of us. And this video focuses on Mizuhara Ippei. He was the interpreter for this Japanese baseball superstar.
Okay.
And they call him Ohtani in the video, like to protect his real name.
Right.
But here's the thing. Mizuhara was in charge of all of Ohtani's money, managing his finances. Yeah. And get this, over 2 years, he took $41 million.
What?
Crazy, right? And he used it all for his own gambling problem.
Oh, no. That's
A total betrayal.
It is a huge betrayal of trust, especially when you think about how much Ohtani makes. Like $35 million a year.
Yeah.
Just from endorsements.
It's mind-blowing.
Plus a $70 million salary.
I know his contract's like set up to pay him more later, but still $41 million gone.
That's a lot of money to just disappear.
Right, like how does that even happen? Wouldn't someone notice?
You would think.
Makes you wonder if it could happen to a famous athlete like Ohtani. Could it happen to any of us?
It really does make you think about, being aware of your finances and having checks and balances in place, even if you have a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely.
But it also makes you think about, like, what really counts as gambling. This video uses a really broad definition of gambling. It says, it's like when people invest money or valuable stuff into something uncertain, hoping to get more money or more valuable stuff back.
Okay, so that's pretty broad. So does that mean, like, investing in the stock market is gambling, or what about starting a business?
Right.
Like, where do we draw the line?
That's where it gets interesting. So the video talks about things like how informed the decision is, how random the outcome is, and if it benefits society in some way.
Okay.
Those things can help us see the difference between a calculated risk and like what we usually think of as gambling.
So putting money in your retirement fund, that's probably not the same as betting all your savings on a horse race.
Exactly. There's risk in almost everything we do.
Right.
But this whole thing with the MLB interpreter and this bigger idea of gambling, it brings up another question, like, why are we even drawn to these risky things?
Yeah, why do we gamble?
Exactly.
Well, the video gets into the psychology of it all, and it points out a few things.
Yeah.
Like, there's that obvious thing of wanting to get rich quick, that dream of winning big and changing your life overnight.
Of course.
But it also talks about the excitement, the adrenaline rush you get from not knowing what's going to happen.
And let's not forget about escaping reality.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, gambling lets them, shut off from their everyday life and get into this world of excitement and possibilities.
It's like stepping into a different reality where the rules are different and anything can happen.
It's
like,
And then there's dopamine.
Oh, yeah.
The thing in your brain that makes you feel good. Well, gambling can trigger that and create this, euphoric feeling that can be really addictive.
So it's not just about the money, it's about the feeling.
Right.
That actually makes a lot of sense, especially when you see how people get hooked on things that don't even have money involved, like video games or even like extreme sports. It's that rush they're after.
Exactly. And then the video takes us to Japan.
Okay.
To this unique form of gambling called pachinko. Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard the name, but I don't really know what it is.
Sounds kind of mysterious.
Yeah, a little bit like something out of a spy movie.
Well, it kind of is. Pachinko is this mechanical game with machines, kind of like pinball, and it's super popular in Japan, even though it's kind of in a legal gray area. The video explains how these pachinko parlors, they have this system to get around the gambling laws.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of winning money, you win prizes.
Okay.
But then you can take those prizes to a different shop, usually right nearby, and trade them in for cash.
It's like a secret code.
Right. They found a way to work within the system while still giving people that gambling thrill.
Wow, that's pretty clever. But the video also tells this more personal story about Keiichi Yoshikawa.
Oh, yeah.
He was a Japanese business executive who got really caught up in gambling.
His story is both fascinating and a warning.
I know, right? He came from a wealthy family, was super successful, and then gambling brought him down.
It makes you think, what makes someone with so much to lose risk it all on something as unpredictable as gambling?
Yeah, was it all about the money or was there something more to it?
It's a great question, and that's what makes Yoshikawa's story so interesting. We'll get deeper into what happened to him and explore, the psychology and emotions behind it all in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait to hear more. This is already shaping up to be one of our most thought-provoking deep dives yet, so stick with us. There's so much more to come.
Welcome back. So before we jump into Yoshikawa's story, it's important to understand his background. He wasn't just some random gambler. This guy was brilliant.
Yeah, the video said he aced the super hard national exam when he was only in 4th grade.
I know, it's crazy. And he was basically set to take over his family's company, Dio Paper Corporation.
Wow, so what happened? How did things go so wrong?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. See, Yoshikawa's family, they had this unusual way of doing things. They kept most of their wealth within the company itself, not like personal assets.
Okay.
It all started because of a financial crisis back in the 60s, and it just became this deep-rooted family tradition.
So even though he came from a wealthy family, he didn't actually have tons of his own money just kind of sitting around. I can see how that could get messy when it comes to company funds, especially with a gambling problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as his gambling got worse, he needed more and more money to keep it going.
Of course.
The video goes into detail about how he started taking money from different subsidiary companies little by little.
Oh, so skimming off the top.
Yeah. Each time it was what seemed like a small amount, like 100 million to 2 billion yen.
But those small amounts, they added up, right?
Oh, yeah. Big time. Eventually became over 10 billion yen.
It's like a reminder that even small choices can have big consequences, especially when it comes to something like gambling.
Absolutely. And what's even crazier is that Yoshikawa didn't even try to hide what he was doing. He kept detailed records of all the transfers.
Seriously?
Yeah, he thought because the money technically belonged to his family, it wasn't a big deal.
So it's like his addiction made him think he was above the rules.
Yeah, it's like his judgment was clouded. He thought he was invincible.
That's scary.
It shows how addiction can warp your sense of reality and make you do things that seem totally crazy to everyone else.
So what happened when his little scheme fell apart?
Well, it caused a huge scandal. Obviously, the police give him choice: return all the money by September 30th, 2011, or face charges.
Oh, wow. A hard deadline.
Yeah, at first Yoshikawa thought he could easily pay it back using company stock.
So he went back to those companies he took from and offered stock to cover the missing funds.
Exactly. And at first, everyone seemed okay with it. But then on the morning of the deadline,
Oh, no.
all 7 subsidiary presidents, they backed out.
What? Why would they do that?
Turns out there was a power struggle going on behind the scenes. Yoshikawa's successor, this guy named Sugawa, he saw a chance to take control of the whole company.
So they totally threw Yoshikawa under the bus.
Yeah, he worked with a lawyer to get the Yoshikawa family out of power completely.
Wow. So it wasn't just about the money, it was about control and power.
It was a classic example of how someone's personal problems can be used for someone else's gain.
That's pretty ruthless.
By refusing to help Yoshikawa repay the money, they forced him into a corner. And it led to his arrest and his family losing their business empire.
It's a reminder that anyone can be vulnerable to bad choices and, people taking advantage of you.
But here's what's really fascinating about Yoshikawa's story. It's his own view of his addiction and everything that happened. While he was waiting for his trial, he wrote a book called Confessions of Kiichi Yoshikawa, former president of Dio Paper Corporation.
Wow. So did he show any remorse or did he try to justify what he did?
He did both, actually. But what really struck me was when he said that gambling wasn't about the money for him.
Really? But he was already so successful and wealthy.
I know, right? But he said he was looking for a level of excitement and thrill that he couldn't find in his everyday life.
What could be more thrilling than running a huge company?
He described it as a near-death experience, a feeling of euphoria and exhilaration that was stronger than anything else he'd ever felt.
So it's like people who do extreme sports or risky activities, they're pushing themselves to the limit for that adrenaline rush.
Yeah, exactly. And Yoshikawa said for him, gambling wasn't about winning or losing. It was about that moment of risk, that feeling of being on the edge.
So the act of gambling itself was the reward?
Right. And what's even more interesting is that he didn't really care about winning or losing. The video talks about a time he lost 40 million yen in one night at a casino in Las Vegas.
40 million in one night.
And he walked away feeling strangely satisfied.
Most people would be devastated to lose that much money.
I know, but he said it felt like experiencing the thrill of losing 40 million, even though technically he only lost the 700,000 yen he brought to the casino.
So it was the intensity of the experience that mattered, not the actual outcome.
Exactly. He was hooked on the emotional roller coaster of gambling.
That's wild. This is giving me a whole new understanding of addiction and how it can show up in unexpected ways.
It's eye-opening, right? The video also mentions that Yoshikawa's gambling got even worse after a trip to Macau. Yeah, he was introduced to high-stakes gambling by a junket rep.
A junket rep. What's that?
They're like luxury travel agents for really rich gamblers.
Okay.
They connect wealthy people with casinos, arrange flights, hotels,
Yeah.
private gambling rooms, even credit lines.
Sounds like something out of a movie.
It is. They cater to the super rich, make it super easy for them to gamble huge amounts of money.
And so this junket rep was a big part of Yoshikawa's downfall.
Yeah, they introduced him to Macau, made it seem like a gambler's paradise, and gave him access to high-stakes games and credit lines.
So they started out helping him have fun, but ended up contributing to his financial ruin.
That's one way to look at it. They gave him the tools to gamble way beyond his means, and it led to his downfall.
Yeah.
It brings up a tough question, though. Are these junket reps responsible for what their clients do?
Yeah, that's a good question. On one hand, they're just providing a service, but on the other hand, they're profiting from people's addictions.
It's complicated. There's no easy answer. But Yoshikawa's story shows how tempting and destructive high-stakes gambling can be, especially when it's encouraged by people who profit from it.
This is all so fascinating. We've gone from a baseball interpreter's betrayal to Japanese pachinko to this whole story of Yoshikawa's downfall.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. We keep uncovering new and unexpected things.
What's really striking is how all these stories have a common thread. The excitement of risk and reward, the psychology of addiction, and that blurry line between taking a healthy risk and destructive gambling.
Right. And Yoshikawa's idea of a gambler's high really makes you think about why people gamble. Is it always about money, or is there something deeper going on, something psychological and emotional?
That's a question we'll keep exploring in the last part of our deep dive. So we've been talking about this gambler's high and how for some people like Yoshikawa, the act of gambling becomes like the main thing, more important than winning or losing. It's like they're chasing a feeling, an adrenaline rush. But if that's the case, why not just bet small amounts? Why risk losing everything for a thrill?
That's a really good question. And it gets to the core of how addiction, messes with our sense of risk and reward.
Right.
The video talks about how Yoshikawa, even though he was so smart and successful in business, he got trapped in this cycle of betting more and more, believing that bigger risks meant bigger highs.
So the stakes themselves become part of the game, like fueling the whole experience.
Exactly.
That's dangerous.
It's a dangerous spiral.
Yeah.
Yoshikawa actually talks about how he would purposely put himself in these super high-pressure situations,
Right.
like betting huge amounts on a single hand of baccarat. He was almost like enjoying the feeling of being on the verge of disaster.
So it wasn't just about the chance of winning big, it was also about the thrill of maybe losing everything.
Yeah, it was like a psychological tightrope walk.
This whole conversation is making me think about my own relationship with risk, you know? Where do we draw the line between healthy risk-taking, like starting a business or trying something new, and, behaviors that could be harmful?
It's a question we all need to think about.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that addiction can take many forms.
True.
The pursuit of these intense emotional experiences like Yoshikawa's gambler's high, they could be just as damaging as any drug.
The video also mentions something else interesting that Yoshikawa says in his book. He challenges the idea that casinos are rigged against the players.
Oh, right. He argues that casinos make money through the house edge. The small percentage they take from each bet, it's like a transaction fee. So they're not really hoping players lose. They just provide the platform and profit from all the bets being placed.
So you're saying casinos are more like neutral facilitators?
Yeah, they set the rules, but at the end of the day, it's a game of chance, and they make money whether people win or lose.
And that's why he says casinos are so strict about cheating, because it's about protecting the fairness of the games and making sure they stay unpredictable. It's definitely a different way of looking at casinos. Most people see them as these places designed to take your money.
It's important to keep in mind, though, that Yoshikawa's perspective comes from his own experiences and beliefs.
Right.
He was a very smart and successful person, and even with his addiction, he was able to stay somewhat detached from the world of gambling.
That's a good point. So his viewpoint might not reflect the average gambler or even the average person struggling with gambling addiction.
Definitely. And it's crucial to remember that gambling addiction is a serious issue with serious consequences. Yoshikawa's story is a warning, but it doesn't take away from the struggles of others who have been affected by this addiction.
This whole deep dive has been so thought-provoking. We've explored gambling from so many angles, the baseball scandal, Japanese pachinko, and Kiichi Yoshikawa's personal story.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these stories all connect back to this idea of risk and reward.
Right.
It's everywhere in our lives, and it's amazing to see how this one concept can show up in such different and unexpected ways.
It makes you think about the risks we take every day, maybe without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Are we investing in a risky stock, starting a new relationship, trying a new recipe? There's always a chance things won't go our way.
And Yoshikawa's story teaches us to be aware of those risks and make smart choices.
Yeah, to understand what could happen, good or bad, before we jump in.
Exactly.
This deep dive has really given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure it sparked some questions for you too. So let us know what you think and what other topics you'd like us to explore in future deep dives.
We're always up for a challenge.